Thank you, Willow and Allie. I'm always amazed by how long and how just amazing that people have lived and thrived here for as long as they have, and how much we can learn from all different kinds of cultures. So next up, we're going to talk about sea otters, and we have folks from Alaska SeaLife Center, Jane Belovarac and crew, when you're coming up, and we'll have you talk to us next. I first I've been out in the Sound since the mid '80s, and right after this, I'm like, I'm going to help out. And so I went down to Seward, where they were doing cleaning birds and sea otters, and I quickly realized that sea otters are not just very cute little animals; they have personalities, which sometimes are very exciting. So I'll turn you guys over to talk to us about sea otters. And
thank you, Paul. That was a great introduction to Seward, the SeaLife Center, and sea otters. So as you can see, there are three of us here. We figured what a great reason to come for a little field trip before our busy season starts. My name's Halley, Werner. I'm joined with Savannah, Costner. We are animal care specialists at the Alaska SeaLife Center, and we specialize in wildlife rehabilitation. And we also have our wildlife response curator, Jane Belovarac, with us, and she is a licensed veterinary technician at the Alaska SeaLife Center as well. So we're super excited to talk with you today. Thank you for having us. Next slide, please. A little background about the Alaska SeaLife Center. We, similar to the previous speakers, we're also came to life as a result of the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So the city of Seward received money in the form of a grant also from the criminal settlement, as well as the oil spill trustee council. We had additional state and city support and private donations, which all aided in the construction of the Alaska SeaLife Center. We are, however, a nonprofit, so we no longer rely on any funding from those sources. We mainly rely on funding from grants, donations, and ticket sales. The reason the Alaska SeaLife Center was created is because the Exxon Valdez oil spill kind of opened people's eyes to realize that there was a need for a facility for research, education, and rehabilitation of animals, and to further the understanding of the ecosystems that the Exxon Valdez oil spill had affected. Next slide. So as representatives of the wildlife response team, we're going to talk about wildlife response. That's what we do. Again, that's a main portion of the purpose of the Alaska SeaLife Center. So our goals, our number one goal is to rehabilitate marine mammals in order to release them whenever possible. You'll learn during our presentation that that is not always possible, but again, we would love to be able to return animals back to their natural habitat whenever we can do that, and we expect them to have a high survival rate. While the animals are with us, we also can learn a lot. We can save some of when we take blood samples to help see how the animals are doing, do a routine health check. Some of that blood can be archived and be used for future research projects. There are a lot of non-invasive research that can be done just by observing animals in our care. We can help improve best practices of animal care by doing what we do every day. We also learn a lot about the health of the ocean. Animals come to us with particular issues. Maybe it's a disease, maybe it's the result of a harmful algal bloom. So the animals that come to us are teaching us about what's happening in our oceans right now. And along with that, disease monitoring. Next slide, please. So how can we actually do what we do? Well, we have permits. Our permits are under U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service of NOAA. Those permits allow us to rescue and rehabilitate particular animals. We are in constant contact with these government agencies and making sure that they approve of every animal pickup before they come to us. We also work with stranding agreement holders across the entire state of Alaska. That's because we are the only marine mammal rehabilitation facility in the entire state of Alaska. So the coastline we cover, as you know, living in Alaska is massive. It's larger than the coastline of the entire lower 48 combined. Therefore, NOAA has many stranding agreement holders throughout the coastal communities of Alaska, and they help not only assess live animals for us, but they help collect information on deceased animals that may be found on the beach in order to help better our understanding of the ecosystem. Next slide. So we do get a lot of calls on our hotline, which you'll be hearing about a lot during this presentation, about dead animals across Alaska. But today we're here to talk primarily about the live animals. We want to give you the cutesy pictures, not the gory ones. That's what we're here for today. So on the screen now, you can see a list of and some photos of the animals that we have, the species that we have admitted for rehabilitation over the course of the time that the Alaska SeaLife Center has been open. Next slide will show you what our most common patients are. So we are just now starting to enter the harbor seal pupping season, and we do expect to get some harbor seal pups this summer that are in need of help. We also can get sea otter pups year round. So harbor seals have a season when they give birth, generally from about mid-May through June. Sea otters, they can just have a pup whenever they want, year round. So these are the two animals that most commonly come through our doors. Next slide, please. So what to do if you see an otter all by their otter self? Each of these species obviously have a different normal depending on the species. A sea otter pup needs to stay with mom basically all the time. So a sea otter pup observed alone could be okay for a brief moment. Mom could just be foraging. They'll leave pups on the surface where they're just floating all cute and happy while mom goes to forage and find all that food she needs to keep up with her metabolic needs. And then she'll pop right back up, grab her pup, fuss with it for a while, and go get more food. But generally, if an otter pup is alone for more than 2 hours, something's wrong and it's been separated from mom. So because these pups are so dependent on mom, they're always with mom. Mom's always fussing with it, grooming it, feeding it, taking care of it. Once they do come into human care and are removed from their natural environment, they usually can't be released because we need to take over all of that care, which is a very intensive 24-hour care process. So because of that, assessment is essential. The last thing we want to do is take a pup that is still with mom. We don't want to kidnap any babies. That wasn't on the list of one of our goals. So what to look for if the pup's been alone for a long time? That's something we would want to know about. Obviously, if it has wounds or injuries, there could have been a traumatic event where something happened to mom and the pup was injured. That's something we want to know about. Entanglements too. Obviously, that's not going to end well for a marine mammal. So we do encourage people to always observe an animal before approaching it. Please don't ever approach it. Just observe the animal and call us. So call first. This is going to be our first plug for our 24-hour stranding hotline. So one of us three ladies, in addition to a handful of others at the SeaLife Center, will always have this cell phone with us. Go ahead and click through those. Do not approach the animal. And here's our hotline. Please feel free to put it in your phone and write it down. Please feel free to give this number out to visitors or anyone in the public, because we want anyone who sees a marine animal that's concerning them to give us a phone call. If you think that animal is in distress, please call us and we are happy to talk you through what might be going on and try to get a better understanding of what's happening. And here is my slide of us becoming otter moms. So it does happen. Otter pups do get separated from mom before they are ready to become independent animals. And if they're separated for too long, they will not survive on their own. So that's where we step in. When that animal's been separated, it's clear mom's not there. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service agrees that its only chance of survival is rehabilitation. We get that phone call, we step in. And now I'm going to pass it off to Savannah to talk about what all that entails.
Okay, great. I get the really fun job of talking about what we actually do and how we rehabilitate these sea otter pups. If you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. So I'm going to be talking 9 million miles an hour to make sure we finish on time, because I could talk about sea otters all day long. So their nutrition, super, super, super important. When we get these pups in, they have an extremely high metabolism. All sea otters do. They have to eat 25 to 35% of their body weight a day to survive. These animals are crazy with their metabolism. So for our pups that come in less than 1 month old, we have to feed them every 2 hours, typically they're around 8 to 10 pounds. So you can imagine how much formula that is. We do feed them a specialized sea otter formula that we make at the SeaLife Center. Why this is super important is because if we don't meet their caloric needs, they can actually go hypoglycemic and actually have seizures and succumb to those seizures. Which is super important, which is why if we see a sea otter pup alone on the beach for too long, we want to step in to make sure that we can start that calorie process as soon as possible. Next slide. So what does that mean? If I weigh 140 pounds, spoiler, I don't, wish I did, I would have to eat 160 quarter-pound cheeseburgers a day. 160. I would love to take that challenge on, but I don't think I could quite get anywhere close to that amount. So since we're talking about solids, next slide, we will start to introduce solids at around 3 to 4 weeks of age, which is exactly what mom would be doing. We try to replicate exactly what mom is doing. We are not sea otter moms, but we try our hardest. So what we're going to be doing is gradually increasing their solid intake and decreasing that bottle intake. We want to make sure that everything is processing, that they're ready to handle these solids. We're going to introduce clam, capelin, squid. As they grow older, we start introducing harder shell object items. But once they get to this, we're still going to check their blood glucose levels because we want to make sure that they're able to survive on what we're giving them. And we're going to reduce the feed to every 3 to 4 hours. Another super important reason why we're going to be constantly monitoring those blood glucose levels. And then as they grow older, we're going to feed them as natural as possible, right? So we're going to have them in the rain. We're going to up those pieces size because as they grow, they need more food. So we're going to increase those piece size. So we're not feeding them tiny pieces about the size of your pinky nail every 3 hours. And around 4 to 5 months, we're going to wean them completely off of the bottle, completely off the formula, which is exactly what mom would be doing with her milk out in the ocean. So another super important part of what we're going to be doing is grooming. You can see in this photo that this kiddo knows what to do. It's instinctive, but it has to be refined and practiced. This is a wet coat. He's very wet. This is actually Dixon. It would take about 2 to 2.5 hours to fully get him completely dry after a swim. He thinks he's proficient at it, but he's not. He's about 3 months in this video. So they're mainly proficient about 4 to 6 months of age. So moms would be sitting there using the mouth to blow air into their coat, using their paws to kind of separate those hairs. So we're going to be using some tools to try to replicate that. We're going to use a towel dryer, a hair dryer on the cool. We never want to cook our sea otters. So in a little video, you'll see a hair dryer actually has the duct tape around it to make sure it stays on the cool setting. And then we're going to use the comb to we're not brushing their fur, we're just kind of trying to separate any of those little mats that are wet together. And then we're going to be constantly checking their temperature. We don't want to overheat them, and we want to make sure that they're not getting too cold in the water. And we want to make sure that their waterproofing is great and that there's no cold seawater getting to their skin, because then they'll have to expend more calories. Sea otters do not have blubber like our seal and sea lion friends. They rely on this coat to stay warm in these Arctic waters. Next slide. So here's a pup. This I actually believe is Rainy, who came from the Prince William Sound. Sometimes the sea otters will just let us do all of the grooming. for them, and that's super nice. You can see her pup coat is really great. It's fully dry. This is what we aim for. You can also see that it kind of has that blonde tinge to it. That's actually the pup coat, and that allows pup to stay at the surface. At this age, they actually cannot dive whatsoever. They are completely reliant on mom to bring the food up to them, to give them everything they need, and so they're just going to be floating at the surface waiting for mom. Next slide. We have really cool tools to use at the SeaLife Center at our disposal. So this is actually a thermal camera that we can use and take pictures of our sea otter coats in the water. So this is a sea otter in one of his pools, and the purple is denoting the really cold sea water, and the red is where he's losing body heat. And so he's just losing body heat on his ears, eyes, and nose, and that's exactly what we would think to see, or we would want to see. So this coat is in great condition, and we know that he's keeping up with his coat, which is amazing. So what is our daily routine like? Well, as a sea otter, we're going to sleep a whole lot, and then we are going to feed them, and then we're going to let them have some playtime. Sea otters are really mischievous. They want to get into absolutely everything. So playtime and keeping their little minds constantly busy is super, super, super important. And of course, we're going to do some grooming, and then we're going to repeat it around the clock for 24 hours a day until they are 6 months of age. So this is a setup of our nursery. We have our weigh bin. Super important to make sure that they're constantly getting weight or maintaining our blood glucose monitor. This thermistor is super cool. It will allow us to implant a little microchip in them and read their temperature. Our rectal probe, our hair dryer comb, our crib with toys, a fan, super important, constantly having that airflow, towels to help them dry off, our potty bin, our play bin, and then, of course, little Miss Rainey in her pool having playtime. You can see she's super buoyant at the surface, and so she's not able to dive, but she's looking back, trying to look at the bottom and see what is under her. And then we can go to the next slide. So I talked a lot about sea otter pups. Typically, that is what we respond to for the most as far as live sea otters go. Why? Adult sea otters are very, very, very challenging. I know how Paul had said there were chainsaws with fur, and it's true. So they have the bite pressure of a black bear, so that in itself is hard to get around. By the time that we are actually able to potentially catch them, usually they're too far gone to successfully rehabilitate, unfortunately. And then on top of that, they're high stress animals, so they can stress out very quickly and very easily. And once they stop grooming their coat or they stop eating, it is downhill very fast for them. So it kind of has to be the right otter with the right personality to get help. Next slide. And we rescued Zippy in Seward during 2020. He was first spotted on March 30th with a bright pink zip tie in the bottom right corner. You can kind of see that zip tie that we were able to get off of him. We actually watched him for a month and a half before we were actually able to get him. Just another reason most adult sea otters are super challenging. Once we got him in, we took the zip tie off. We took x-rays. If you look in the bottom left, the left paw, or the one on the left, is his left paw, and it looks great, looks normal. The one on the right, you can actually see the indentation of where that zip tie was. And then between the bones, I don't know if you guys can see, but it's super fuzzy. That means he has a pretty bad bone infection. So now we have this adult sea otter who has a bone infection, which are notoriously hard to treat, takes super long to treat. How are we going to help him? Well, we were actually able to reach out to the Marine Mammal Center, and they sent us injectable antibiotics. So we did that for a month, and he was able to be released back out into Seward. And we have gotten several reports of him out there thriving and surviving. So that's pretty excited to hear about. Next slide. I believe it's going to go on to our Old Wildlife Response Program, which Jane is going to talk about.
All right, so talking about perseverance and tenacity. SeaLife Center started back in 1988, and I think some of you have even started helping even before that if you were part of the Exxon Valdez oil spill recovery. And from that information, they learned a lot. And so about 13 years ago, the SeaLife Center said, we are ready to start to put together teams to be ready for the next major oil spill. So with that, in order to work on an oil spill, you have to be certified in HAZWOPER 24, learn about all the dangerous chemicals and how to protect yourself if you are working with oil. You also have to learn about the chain of command, because wildlife response in oil spill is a very small cog in the very large wheel of oil spill. Then we have to have people who are able to respond. So at the SeaLife Center, we do require pretty much everybody who works in husbandry to be oil spill certified. And through our grants and also through donations and foundations, we try to keep wildlife response staff here year round, because we are the experienced people. We are the ones who have the background on how to take care of these animals. But with that, you can't do it in a vacuum. When it comes to oil spill response, not only are you taking care of the animals, but you have to take care of the facilities that work for them. So having our life support folks to help with pumping, also veterinarians, because of these animals are going to be sick. Researchers, they are the backbone of the SeaLife Center. A lot of what they've learned over the years is what we can apply to how we take care of our animals. And of course, education. It's very important to be getting the information out there so people know what to look for and to learn about the big picture. Next slide. So with the program that we have at the SeaLife Center, we have expanded it significantly. It's not only the staff at the SeaLife Center, but we also train animal care staff throughout the country, and actually now throughout the world. We have had some classes in South Africa, and you might have heard that there can be some pretty significant oil spills down there with penguins and seals and stuff like that. So currently we have around 600 animal care staff from various zoos and facilities across the world who are HAZWOPER trained and able to come up here and help with an oil spill, or that we're able to go down and help them if they have a major oil spill. Next slide. So what a lot of people think is that if we had an oil spill, that the animals would just come to the SeaLife Center and we would take care of them. That's not necessarily true. When the SeaLife Center was built, it does not have the infrastructure, it does not have the septic system to be able to handle the oiled wastewater that would come from animal recovery. So as a result, we have created connexes and pools based on the model that we had from the group that made connexes and stuff from the oil spill back in Valdez. So the next one is going to be like a small video of the infrastructure we have that's actually portable. Within 24 hours of an oil spill, we can have this infrastructure on site to start responding to animals if we're called up. So what we have are basically two sets of connexes. Then we have a hospital. So we have two hospitals, two food prep areas, two areas for humans to live in. And then we're good to go. Okay, so we'll go show a video of that. So this is what we had a drill a few years ago where we set up everything across the bay from Seward at the Seward shipyard. And so what you're looking at now is the pool. It's a 10-foot circular pool that can actually be collapsed down on the pallets and thus be very, very portable. We actually have a pool up on the north slope that's already on the pallets in case we have to go up there. What you're looking at here is the inside of the hospital suite, and then that's the food prep suite. Food prep suite has freezers and refrigerators. Everything can be either connected to generators or to, if we have electricity and water as part of the infrastructure already, we can connect directly into that. And as you can see, everything is pretty much, it's just a connex. So it just needs to either get on a truck, get on a barge, with the idea that we could be on site within 24 hours and start cleaning animals. And then within that time, start calling up partners local, we work closely with the oil spill partners, and a lot of them are also trained in HAZWOPER 24 that they can help us. So that's the end of that video. So yeah, it's a pretty intense situation. We hope we never have to do, but if we do, we're ready for it. All right, I believe that is the last slide. So as we said, that we are a nonprofit organization. So if you're interested in helping, there's different ways. Of course, if you have an animal that you're concerned about, you can give our hotline a call. We do have different fundraising options, including just buying items directly from our Amazon wish list. You can adopt an animal or become a member. And of course, volunteering is very helpful as well. We have, like I said, we have people who are HAZWOPER 24 certified. I would say that it is a challenge with Seward, especially in the wintertime, for us to get consistent volunteers. But we do have people in Homer, and there's people based in Anchorage that we can often call on in case there's an animal concern. All right, and like what Halley said earlier before, that we don't do the stuff in a vacuum. We are under a bunch of government permits in order to do the work we do. And I believe that is our last one. Does anybody have any questions? All right, yes.
People who were able to capture them. How did you capture them, and then how do you have information on the whereabouts of the
Yes. Yes, I will. Yeah. So the question was about Zippy, the sea otter that had the cable tie around its wrist. It took us 2 months to capture him because when he first presented, he was a robust adult young male otter. And so we essentially had to wait for him to get sick enough that we could catch him. And so that's why we had the harbor folks watching out, all the fishermen watching out. And eventually he started to show a pattern where he would spend like the beginning of the day in the harbor and then work his way along the shoreline, actually towards the SeaLife Center and where the Cugach is often docked. And he ended up on that last day beaching himself on the boat ramp near us. And it actually took 8 hours. I think Halley was part of that. At least 5 hours of coming and going, trying to get the nets just right. And it was actually our husbandry director, Lisa, who had a really long net. And I believe she was off the boat. So she was like several feet off on the Cugach, which is a large research vessel. And Zippy was weak enough that we were finally able to scoop him out of the water. But this was during COVID. So we had to be very careful because it was still in the questionable time. Like, can you stand next to people? Can you work with people? And also, he was just he was tenacious in that he was a wild otter. And so there were many times that we would get a team together to go get him. And the fisher person said, okay, yeah, he's on the dock by my boat. And we'd get out there and he'd be gone. So that's why one of the reasons it took 2 months to catch him. And then it's interesting is that after he was starting to feel better, he was totally like, I'm done with you guys. I want out of here. And he started showing us some signs that he was feeling good. He wasn't as sleepy. He was starting to be a little more picky, but he was eating. And so we're like, yeah, it's time to go. So what we did is we put 2 flipper tags, one on each bottom flipper, and they're special temple tags, essentially, that it's really hard for an otter to remove them. And so that's how it was the boat captains and the fishermen throughout Resurrection Bay that when they saw him, they would call it in. Yeah. All right. Yes. Oh, one more question. Okay.
Center, or do you need a specific call out?
That's a good question. So his question was essentially, how do we respond or how are we activated? We are subcontracted through the contractors are contracted from the oil companies. There's a lot of co-ops and stuff like that. If there was an oil spill, this main company is activated, and then we're part of that. So a situation we had a few years ago is that there was a spill in Valdez, and we were called in to help monitor the situation. We didn't respond right away because there weren't any animals involved yet, but we were watching like every day. They had monitors out there every day to see if animals start to become involved. So the organizations you might have heard from CISPRI, which is Cook Inlet Spill Prevention. And then we have Alaska Clean Seas. Alaska Clean Seas, I believe, is the northern part of Alaska. And then we are part of One Alaska, and they're part of Western and the Aleutians. And then we also recently partnered with International Bird Rescue. So when they have problems, that we can help them with bird rescue as well. So yeah, a lot of people think, oh, you got an old animal, you just go get it. We have to be given the powers that be say, okay, we need help. And then they call us up. All right, thank you.